June 5, 1944, near the village of Hermonville-sur-Mer, Normandy. A low mist clings to the hedgerows. The air smells faintly of diesel and damp earth. Inside a camouflaged orchard, a German Panzer IV of the 21st Panzer Division sits silent beneath a net of branches. Its crew, 5 men hardened by years of war, listen to the faint rumble rolling in from the channel. Oberfeldwebel Hans Keller, commander of the tank, leans out of the cupola, scanning the gray horizon. In the distance, flashes of light flicker over the water, too distant to hear clearly, yet rhythmic enough to stir unease. "Probably another British exercise," mutters gunner Karl Heinrich, spitting into the mud. "They'll never dare to land here, and if they do, these Shermans of theirs won't last 5 minutes." Laughter ripples through the crew. They've seen Allied armor in North Africa and Italy, burned-out hulks scattered across battlefields, their turrets blown off like toy lids. The Sherman, they believe, is a death trap, gasoline-fueled, lightly armored, armed with a 75mm gun that can't penetrate a Tiger's front plate. For 2 years, propaganda and experience alike have told them the same story. German engineering reigns supreme. Panzers are precision instruments. Shermans are clumsy machines churned out from factories that know nothing of the front. Yet as midnight approaches, Keller feels the ground tremble again, louder this time, continuous, not artillery, engines. The radio crackles, an urgent transmission from division headquarters. Feindlandung wahrscheinlich in the Normandy, Alarmstufe Rot. Enemy landing probable in Normandy, red alert. Every man freezes. Keller lowers himself into the turret, sealing the hatch with a metallic clang. "Start her up," he orders quietly. The Maybach engine coughs, then roars to life. The orchard shivers with vibration. In the glow of the instrument lights, sweat beads on foreheads. Outside, the night sky begins to pulse. Far beyond the dunes, the channel horizon flickers as if struck by lightning. But it isn't lightning. It's the opening bombardment of Operation Neptune, the largest amphibious invasion in history. Shells arc over the coast, slamming into German gun positions. Telephone lines go dead one by one. In coastal villages, cows panic and fences splinter. To the men crouched inside their panzers, the thunder feels endless, unhuman, an industrial rhythm that seems to say, "We are coming." Dawn, June 6, 1944. The mist lifts, revealing a horizon filled with ships. Hundreds, no thousands. Keller raises his binoculars and whispers, "Mein Gott!" Landing craft swarm toward the beaches like insects. Overhead, the sky swarms with aircraft, thunderbolts, typhoons, lightnings, circling in perfect formation. The Luftwaffe is nowhere to be seen. At 6:30 a.m., naval guns resume their pounding. Each concussion ripples through the soil. Keller's crew covers their ears as clods of dirt rain down through the camouflage netting. "So many targets," Heinrich says, trying to sound confident. "If they bring their Shermans, we'll pick them off like rabbits." But then they hear something else, a deeper mechanical rumble coming from the coast. Through the haze, Keller spots shapes bobbing in the surf. Tanks. Some are sinking, but others crawl forward on canvas skirts, churning through the water like amphibious beasts. DD Shermans. "They're swimming?" Otto Franz blurts. "That's impossible." Yet they are. The first wave reaches the sand, dropping their flotation screens. Turrets traverse, guns fire. Muzzle flashes bloom through the smoke. German machine gun nests are obliterated within seconds. From his position, Keller cannot move. His orders are to wait for counterattack orders from headquarters. The radio squawks incoherently. Half the net is down. Static fills the headphones. He hears fragments like "Omaha, heavy resistance," Caen under bombardment, then silence again. By mid-morning, reports come in Allied armor is pushing off the beaches. The Sherman toys are advancing through the hedgerows faster than expected. For every one destroyed, 2 more seem to appear behind it. Where are they all coming from? Keller mutters. Factories, the reply comes grimly. Endless factories. At 10 a.m., the order finally comes. Counterattack near Lyon-sur-Mer. Engage enemy armor. Keller's Panzer lurches onto a dirt road, joined by 4 others. They maneuver past burned trucks and shattered buildings. The smell of cordite and wet straw fills the air. As they crest a hill, the first Shermans appear, 3 of them moving cautiously through a field. Keller lines up the gunner. Range 800. Fire. The 75mm round slams into the lead Sherman's glacis and burst through. Flames erupt. The crew cheers. 1 shot, 1 kill, just as training promised. But seconds later, another Sherman takes its place, and another. In the tree line beyond, more silhouettes emerge. The horizon seems alive with motion, armor rolling over the countryside in disciplined waves. Machine gun tracers streak through the wheat. Artillery whines overhead. Keller fires again, hits another, but now his flanks are under threat. The radio screams with overlapping voices. They're everywhere! Air attack incoming! P-47s dive out of the sun, rockets screaming. Explosions bracket the road. 2 Panzers vanish in fireballs. Keller slams the hatch shut, yelling for reverse, but the track's jammed with debris. He can't move. Smoke floods the turret. Out! Out! They scramble into a drainage ditch as their tank burns. Around them, the fields are alive with chaos. American infantry crawling forward behind the Shermans. Artillery still falling, the sky filled with planes. For the first time, the crew stops laughing. They stare as the tide of machinery and men rolls inexorably inland, each wave more organized than the last. The vaunted German armor doctrine, independent, precise, elite, is being buried beneath sheer volume. Keller wipes soot from his face, stunned. "They're not supposed to have this many," he whispers. "They do," the driver answers quietly, "and they're not stopping." As night falls, the glow of burning vehicles lights the horizon from Caen to Bayeux. Somewhere far behind, engines rumble. More Shermans, more trucks, more everything. The invasion has begun. The myth of German invincibility is cracking. June 6, 1944. Morning. Vierville-sur-Mer, Normandy. The tide is red. Charred landing craft drift ashore, their ramps splintered. Dead men and broken gear lie scattered among the shingle. But amid the smoke and wreckage, something moves, deliberate, unstoppable. The unmistakable silhouettes of M4 Sherman tanks crawl up from the surf, their treads clanking over corpses, steel and sandbags. One of them, courageous, of the 741st Tank Battalion, leads a group of exhausted infantrymen up the bluffs. Its canvas flotation screen hangs in tatters, its turret scarred from near misses. Sergeant William Harris, crouched behind its tread, yells to his gunner, "Stick close to the Shermans. They're the only thing the Krauts fear today." Each tank feels alive, engines roaring like mechanical hearts. The crews inside can hardly see, their vision ports streaked with mud and salt, but they press forward regardless. Every few seconds, a flash from the cliffs. German 88mm guns open fire, shells shrieking overhead. A direct hit tears through one Sherman's side armor, igniting its fuel. The turret hatch bursts open as the crew scrambles out, one man on fire, rolling frantically in the sand. Still, the others keep moving. There's no pause, no hesitation. A British war correspondent, observing from a landing craft, later wrote, It was as though the tanks were not machines, but a will. They advanced as if the sea itself were delivering them, endless, implacable, inevitable. By midday, the first armored elements have broken through the coastal defenses. They lumber past wrecked bunkers and surrendered gun crews, the air thick with cordite and diesel fumes. Naval guns still pound inland positions, shaking the ground like an earthquake. And above it all, hundreds of aircraft sweep overhead, Spitfires, Thunderbolts, and Typhoons, strafing every road and hedgerow that could hide a German ambush. 20 miles inland, the village of Les Bas de Ranville. Oberfeldfebel Hans Keller and his surviving crew sit in the mud beside their burned-out Panzer IV, waiting for orders. The failed phone is dead, the Luftwaffe absent. Columns of smoke stretch toward the coast. Keller wipes grime from his face, watching the distant flashes of naval artillery. He had once believed in the invincibility of the Wehrmacht, in the genius of German steel and the superiority of their training. But the horizon tells a different story now. A courier on a motorcycle skids to a halt beside them, shouting over the thunder, "All units regroup near Caen! The British are pushing from the beaches. We're to hold until reinforcements arrive." Reinforcements. Keller knows what that means. Another desperate stand, another handful of tanks thrown against an army that seems to have no end. He and his men commandeered an abandoned Kubelwagen and raced toward Caen, weaving past refugees, shattered convoys, and smoldering wrecks. Every road feels like a death trap. Every hedgerow hides movement. At a crossroads near Perrier Ridge, they encounter a scene that sears itself into memory. A German 88mm gun firing across an open field at approaching Shermans. The first American tank erupts in a geyser of flame, but another instantly moves to fill the gap, then another and another. The gunners swing the barrel, loading frantically, their faces pale and blistered from heat. They fire again. Another Sherman dies. But the return fire is relentless. The earth itself seems to crawl with them. Within minutes, the 88mm crew is wiped out, their guns smoking and twisted. Keller can only stare. "They just keep coming," he mutters. That night, in a farmhouse outside Caen, a handful of German tank officers gather around a flickering oil lamp. Maps litter the table, red circles marking fresh landings at Omaha, Juno, Sword, and Gold. Major Alfred Becker, an engineer who converted French vehicles into makeshift tank destroyers, slams his fist on the table. "They've landed 30 divisions! 30! Our reserves are half that!" Someone laughs bitterly. "Half of those reserves have no fuel." Silence falls. Outside, the sound of distant engines echoes through the night, a constant mechanical hum carried on the wind. Keller glances out the window. Across the fields, in the dim moonlight, he can see flickers, columns of Allied armor moving steadily inland, headlights masked but unmistakable. He whispers almost to himself, "They build them faster than we can burn them." June 7th, 1944, morning. The battle for Caen begins. British and Canadian armored divisions push south against the 21st Panzer and 12th SS Hitler-Jugend divisions. Sherman after Sherman rolls through villages reduced to rubble. Dust clouds rise like ghosts. The Germans counterattack fiercely, their Panthers and Tigers tearing through the first waves. But as soon as one fight ends, another begins. The Allies replace losses in hours. The Germans take days, sometimes weeks. A field mechanic in the 12th SS writes in his diary that night, "For every tank we destroy, 3 more appear. They move like ants, swarming through the hedgerows. We kill one, and the column does not stop. It simply closes the gap." Even the vaunted Tiger battalions cannot stem the tide. They are too few, too slow, and too dependent on perfect supply lines that no longer exist. For the first time since 1940, the German Armor Corps fights not as hunters, but as prey. In the fading light, Keller walks the perimeter of his new position. Nearby, a captured Sherman sits in the field, its engine still warm, its olive paint scorched by fire. He touches the side armor with a gloved hand, thinner than his Panzers, crudely welded, but its turret turns smoothly, its systems intact. It is not beautiful, not elegant, but it works. And that, he realizes, might be the greatest weapon of all. The night sky flickers again, not with lightning, but with the endless lights of approaching convoys from the beaches. The ground vibrates faintly, like the pulse of something immense and inexhaustible. June 8, 1944, northern outskirts of Caen, Normandy. Rain falls in sheets, turning the wheat fields into thick brown sludge. The smell of fuel, mud, and burned flesh clings to everything. On a ridge overlooking the road to Buran, a squadron of British Sherman Fireflies waits beneath camouflage nets. Their long 17-pounder guns glisten in the drizzle. Inside one of them, Lieutenant Peter Haynes rubs condensation from his periscope and peers through the mist. "Enemy armor, 11 o'clock, his gunner says quietly. Through the murk, dark shapes emerge, Panthers of the 12th SS Hitlerjugend Division. Sleek, angular, powerful. Haynes feels a chill. "Steady, let them come closer." The Panthers roll forward confidently, their commanders exposed in open hatches, scanning with binoculars. They have good reason for confidence. In head-to-head combat, a Panther's 75mm KWK-42 could destroy a Sherman long before the Sherman's gun could reply. German tankers often joked that a Sherman needed to flank, sneak, and prey. But this morning, that equation is about to change. "Target the lead tank," Haynes whispers. "Range 900. Fire!" The Firefly recoils violently, its long barrel spitting fire. The tungsten shell slices through the mist, punching through the Panther's frontal armor. The German tank erupts, its turret hurled sideways. Seconds later, a second Firefly joins in. Another Panther burns. Suddenly, the confidence of the German formation falters. They reverse hastily, their own shots whistling overhead. Within minutes, the field is a smoking wreck. Through the periscope, Haynes watches German crewmen flee their machines, hands raised, silhouettes distorted by the flames. "Who's the rabbit now?" his gunner murmurs. Haynes doesn't answer. He just watches as the wind shifts, carrying the scent of burning oil and cordite. The myth of the Panther's invincibility, once whispered like gospel through every Allied briefing room, has begun to crack. By June 12th, the battle for Caen becomes a grinding stalemate of tanks, artillery, and shattered villages. The Allies push south through rubble-strewn streets, the Germans counterattack from every hedgerow. Every field is an ambush, every farmhouse a fortress. Inside a Panther dug in near Villers-Bocage, SS Unterscharführer Rolf Steiner cleans his gun breech and mutters, "We can destroy 10, 20, even 30 of their tanks. It makes no difference." His loader, a 19-year-old named Becker, laughs bitterly. "There will always be 30 more." That night, Steiner watches truck convoys moving across the distant horizon, endless headlights winding like rivers of light, Allied logistics in motion. He knows what it means: fuel, ammunition, spare parts, replacements, everything the Germans now lack. The 21st Panzer Division receives orders to counterattack near Eperon, but of their original 100 tanks, barely 40 remain operational. They move by night, dodging Allied fighter bombers. The sound of typhoons haunt every road. Daylight means death from above. By contrast, the Shermans never seem to rest. Repair crews swarm over damaged tanks, swapping engines and tracks overnight. Wrecks are towed back to beaches, repaired and returned to service within days. A U.S. ordnance officer later wrote, "We didn't just fight with tanks, we fought with factories. Our tanks never truly died, they just took a trip back to England for a tune-up." June 26, 1944. Operation Epsom begins. Scottish and British units supported by Shermans push west of Caen against the 12th SS and 2nd Panzer Corps. Rain turns the fields to quagmires. The battle devolves into attrition, armor grinding forward yard by yard. For every German gun that fires, Allied artillery answers with 10. The Shermans advance behind rolling barrages, smoke thick as fog. Infantry cling to their hulls, slipping in mud, choking on fumes. Panthers fire from hull-down positions, killing dozens, but each time they withdraw, fresh Shermans close in. By July, Caen is a graveyard of metal. Its medieval spires lie broken, streets cratered, entire districts flattened by bombing. The Panzer Division, once the pride of the German armored force, reports losing 250 of its 300 vehicles. Fuel trucks lie abandoned, horses drag the few remaining guns. Oberfeldwebel's Hans Keller, whose crew now serves with remnants of the 21st Panzer Division, crouches in the cellar of a ruined farmhouse south of Caen. The air reeks of smoke and wet concrete. Through a crack in the wall, he watches columns of Allied tanks creeping closer, their silhouettes ghostly in the morning haze. "Do you think they ever sleep?" his gunner asks. "Machines don't sleep, and they're fighting with machines now." Outside, a firefly fires, a deafening crack, followed by a thunderous explosion somewhere up the road. Keller grips his pistol, though he knows it's useless. The sound of engines grows louder. For the first time in his career, he understands what it means to be on the wrong side of momentum. No matter how many Shermans they burn, more will come. No matter how many bridges they blow, new ones appear overnight. War has become a matter of mass, and Germany no longer can keep up. By July 9th, Caen finally falls. The British flag rises over the shattered city. To the north, endless columns of Shermans roll past the ruins, heading for the next front. Children peek from cellars, watching the olive-drab giants thunder by. Soldiers toss them chocolate bars and chewing gum. For the Allies, it is a triumph, but an exhausting one. For the Germans, it is a revelation. Their greatest armor formations, once feared across Europe, have been broken not by superior guns, but by endless persistence, industrial rhythm, and sheer numbers. Keller sits on the hood of a captured jeep that evening, staring at the setting sun. He hears distant gunfire, the buzz of aircraft, and the rumble of American tanks heading west. "This isn't war anymore," he says quietly. "It's production." He lights a cigarette with shaking hands and watches as the smoke drifts upward into a sky already filled with new waves of planes. Tomorrow, he knows, the Shermans will come again. July 18th, 1944. The hills outside Saint-Lô, Normandy. At dawn, the valley is swallowed in fog, heavy, choking, and thick with the metallic taste of gunpowder. The smell of rain mingles with burned wheat and diesel fumes. All around, the landscape looks as if it's been torn apart by giants. Hedgerows shredded by shells, barns split in half, craters filled with stagnant water. Inside a Sherman M4A1 of the U.S. 2nd Armored Division, Sergeant Frank DeLuca wipes mud from his periscope. His gunner, Corporal Red Malone, adjusts the sight, his knuckles raw and blackened with oil. The radio hums with tension. "Thunderbolt calling Iron Hand, you're green to roll. Cobras go in 15 minutes. DeLuca glances at his watch. 09:15. They've been waiting weeks for this. Operation Cobra, the long-awaited breakout from Normandy. Behind them, the U.S. 9th Air Force and hundreds of B-17s are already forming up, their droning engines filling the sky. Ahead of them lies Saint-Lô, still in German hands, the last gateway before open country. The Shermans sit nose to tail along a narrow country road, mud clinging to their tracks. Each carries spare track links, tarpaulin, and a Lucky Charm, a bottle of Coca-Cola tied to the antenna, a pin-up pasted on the turret. They've fought for every hedgerow, every farmyard, every miserable acre. Now, if Cobra works, they'll finally break free from the green labyrinth that's bled them dry. At 9:38, the sky opens up. Hundreds of American bombers sweep overhead, dropping their payloads on German defensive lines just west of Saint-Lô. The earth heaves. Shock waves ripple through the Sherman's hulls, rattling bolts loose. Dirt and debris rain down like hail. "Christ almighty," Malone mutters. "Feels like the end of the world." In a way, it is. The German front line, an intricate web of bunkers, trenches, and 88mm gun pits, is pulverized in minutes. But the price is steep. One bomber group overshoots, and bombs fall short into friendly lines. Columns of smoke rise behind them. Still, DeLuca's tank lurches forward. The order is given, advance. The entire armored column surges ahead, engines roaring in unison. The roar of 76mm guns and Browning machine guns echoes across the countryside. Shermans fitted with rhino hedgerow cutters spearhead the assault, steel prongs welded to their bows that rip through the earthen walls the Germans had relied on for cover. The terrain that once favored the defenders now betrays them. German infantry, deafened by the bombing, scramble out of their foxholes, only to find tanks bursting through hedgerows at point-blank range. Machine gun tracers stitch through the fog. Grenades arc through shattered trees. DeLuca's gunner fires 1, 2, 3 rounds, each one slamming into a farmhouse where an 88 had just opened up. "Good hit! Next target, right corner!" "On it, Sarge." They move with almost mechanical precision. Behind them, columns of half-tracks and supply trucks rumble forward, kicking up dust. The Red Ball Express will soon follow, bringing fuel, ammo, and replacements, the arteries of the Allied machine. July 25, 1944. The breakthrough is real. After weeks of stalemate, the front finally cracks. The German 352nd Infantry Division, battered and half-blind, disintegrates under the assault. Tanks from the U.S. 3rd Armored Division pour through the gap, followed by mechanized infantry. The countryside erupts in motion, the long-awaited flood. Oberfeldwebel Hans Keller watches from a ridgeline west of Saint-Lô. His Panzer IV has been repaired twice already, but they're out of shells and almost out of fuel. Around him, the landscape smolders. Columns of smoke mark burning vehicles. "They've broken through," says his driver flatly. "Where?" "Everywhere." Keller peers through his binoculars. What he sees takes his breath away. A seemingly endless convoy, tanks, trucks, jeeps, half-tracks, streaming through the valley, churning dust for miles. It's not an army, he realizes. It's a machine, one that eats fuel and steel and men, but never stops moving. He lowers the glasses. His hands tremble slightly. "We can't fight that. No one can." They try anyway. A hastily assembled counterattack forms near Villebadon, Panthers and Panzers firing from tree lines. For a moment they cut into the advancing Shermans, destroying a dozen. But minutes later, P-47 Thunderbolts swoop overhead, their rockets shrieking. The German formation vanishes in fireballs. The survivors scatter into the hedgerows, hunted from above. July 29, 1944. Saint-Lô is a ruin, the capital of ruins, as the Americans will later call it. The streets are lined with rubble, every building hollowed out. Inside what used to be a cathedral square, tanks from the U.S. 30th Infantry Division rumble past cheering French civilians. For the men inside the Shermans, the joy feels muted. They've seen too much, lost too many. But they can smell victory and open road. DeLuca leans from his turret as his tank clanks through the square. A French boy runs alongside, waving a tattered French flag. "We made it," Malone says softly. "Yeah, now let's see how far we can go." They both know the plan. Turn south, link with the 3rd Armored Division, and drive east. The breakout is now a pursuit. And once again, the Shermans, underestimated, derided, mocked, lead the charge. To the east, Keller's unit receives the retreat order too late. They're nearly encircled. German columns clog every road. Tanks, trucks, horses, refugees, all retreating under constant air attack. The once proud Panzer divisions are shadows of themselves, burned-out skeletons of iron. At dusk, as Keller's crew abandons their final tank, out of fuel, engine seized, he looks back over his shoulder. The horizon glows orange with fire. American artillery flashes like lightning. "They laughed at those Shermans," he says quietly to no one in particular. "So did I." He pauses, hearing the faint rumble of armor growing louder in the distance. Not anymore. By the 1st of August, Saint-Lô and the Cotentin Peninsula are firmly in Allied hands. The unpassed static front now moves east at a speed the Germans cannot comprehend. What began as a beachhead has become a tidal wave, one fueled by factories, maintained by logistics, and driven by men who refuse to stop. For every Sherman destroyed, 5 more take its place. For every burned-out tank, a fresh one lands at Cherbourg or rolls off a British dock. The German High Command watches in disbelief as their armored reserve, their last hope, collapses. The Americans have found their rhythm. And for the German Panzer crews, the laughter is over. August 2nd, 1944. South of Vire, Normandy. The countryside trembles beneath the sound of movement. Engines, endless engines. Dust clouds stretch for miles as American and British armor advances through open country for the first time since D-Day. The hedgerows that had slowed them for weeks are behind them now. Ahead lies rolling farmland, and beyond that, the heart of France. Inside a Sherman M4A3, Sergeant Frank DeLuca leans against his turret, squinting through binoculars. The air shimmers with heat. To his right, hundreds of tanks crawl forward across the horizon, olive-drab shapes shimmering in waves like a steel tide. "You ever seen anything like this?" asks Malone, the gunner, his voice muffled through the turret intercom. "No," DeLuca replies, "and neither have they." They, the German 7th Army and 5th Panzer Army, are falling back in disarray. Units are splintered, communications broken, fuel gone. But Hitler's orders are absolute: hold Normandy at all costs. That order will soon trap tens of thousands of men in a pocket history will call Falaise. August 5th. At the German field headquarters near Argenton, Oberfeldwebel Hans Keller studies a map lit by flickering lantern light. The room is hot and smells of sweat, oil, and exhaustion. His Panzer crew is reduced to 3 men now, a gunner, a driver, and himself. Their last functioning tank, a Panzer IV, has no spare parts and half a fuel tank. A staff officer bursts in and shouts, "The Americans have taken Avranches! They're through to Brittany!" The room erupts in disbelief. Avranches had been the hinge, the one place the Germans believed impenetrable. Now Patton's Third Army is loose in open country, slicing south and east faster than any German unit can react. Keller looks down at the map. The red arrows of Allied advances spread like wildfire. He knows what it means. Encirclement. August 7th. Operation Lüttich. Desperation drives the Germans to counterattack near Mortain. Panzer Lehr and 2nd SS Das Reich divisions throw what's left of their tanks at the American lines, hoping to cut them off from Avranches. The assault begins before dawn. Panthers roll out under cover of mist, their engines rumbling low. For a few hours they make progress, knocking out a handful of Shermans, scattering U.S. infantry. Then, as the sun rises, the clouds part. Above them, a new sound grows, a distant whine that becomes a roar. "Thunderbolts," Keller says, looking up. P-47s dive in pairs, unleashing rockets and bombs. Columns of fire leap skyward. Within minutes, the counterattack is shredded. Panthers burn, fuel trucks detonate, and the few surviving tanks retreat under a storm of shrapnel. In those brief moments, the Luftwaffe's absence is absolute. The sky belongs entirely to the Allies. Keller's crew barely escapes. His driver, wounded and shaking, mutters, "We can't fight a war like this anymore. Even the air hates us." Keller says nothing. He knows the truth. Their war is collapsing from the top down. August 12th. In a French meadow outside Trun, an American forward unit pauses by a column of burning German vehicles. The stench is overwhelming. Rubber, flesh, diesel. Overhead, C-47 transports drone eastward, ferrying supplies faster than the Germans can even move. DeLucas Sherman idles by a hedgerow, its gun barrel blackened from days of constant firing. The crew hasn't slept properly in 3 nights. They're pushing north to meet the Canadians and Poles, closing in from the other side. They say there's 20 divisions in that pocket. You think that's true? Doesn't matter. They can't get out. From the ridge ahead, he can see them. Columns of German trucks and tanks moving through the narrow roads below, all heading east, all under constant bombardment. Every field smolders, every village burns. The entire landscape is a killing ground. August 16th, Falaise Pocket. The German retreat becomes a massacre. Roads jam with thousands of vehicles, tanks without fuel, trucks without wheels, horses dragging cannons through the mud. Allied artillery pounds them from every direction. P-47s swoop down like hawks, strafing anything that moves. Keller's tank limps eastward, its treads cracked, fuel nearly gone. Around him, chaos. Men run, stumble, fall. Wounded horses scream, trucks burn like torches. He passes an SS officer shouting orders from the roadside, his voice drowned by artillery. Keep moving east! But there is no east anymore, only fire. When Keller's tank finally seizes up, they abandon it and crawl through ditches, moving at night, hiding by day. They hear nothing but artillery, explosions, and the endless groan of Sherman engines drawing closer. For 3 days they move like ghosts through the wreckage of the German army. When the pocket finally closes near Chambois, Keller looks back from a ridge and sees what's left. Thousands of vehicles, tens of thousands of bodies. He murmurs, almost in disbelief, "That's it. That's the war." August 21st, 1944. The Falaise pocket collapses. Roughly 50,000 German soldiers are captured. Thousands more lie dead or missing. Entire divisions vanish. The road from Falaise to Chambois becomes known simply as the Corridor of Death. De Luca's tank rumbles through the wreckage days later. The crew stares silently as they pass twisted armor, burned wagons, bloated horses, and blackened corpses. It smells like hell. "This is what happens when they run out of gas," Malone mutters. De Luca nods. "And we never do." He's right. Behind them, Red Ball Express convoys stretch for miles, delivering fuel and ammunition around the clock. The Americans never stop. They can't stop. For Keller, captured near Trun with what remains of his crew, the sight of the endless Allied columns that pass them on the road feels surreal. Shermans, half-tracks, trucks, all moving east in perfect rhythm. He remembers laughing at the Sherman once, calling it a toy. Now, as one rolls past, its crew waving cheerfully, tossing chocolate bars to the French civilians, Keller realizes the awful truth. The tank itself was never the real weapon. The weapon was the system behind it. Factories, logistics, fuel, men, and morale all fused into one unstoppable machine. Keller lowers his eyes as another column passes, the thunder of treads echoing down the road like the heartbeat of a new world. For the German Panzer Corps, Normandy is over. For the Allies, it's only the beginning. August 25th, 1944, south of Argenton, France. The morning sun glows red through a haze of smoke and dust. The roads are packed, not with retreating Germans this time, but with motion. Convoys, tanks, jeeps, trucks, half-tracks, bulldozers, an entire industrial river flowing east. Sergeant Frank De Luca's Sherman rolls along the narrow country road behind a column of Red Ball Express trucks. His driver, sweating under the August heat, mutters as he steers, "Feels like we're chasing our own shadows, Sarge. They move faster than we do." He's right. Behind every mile of Allied advance moves a staggering feat of logistics, a miracle as decisive as any battlefield victory. The Germans had mocked the Sherman, but what they hadn't seen was the army behind the tank, the invisible machine of supply, maintenance, and manpower that made it immortal. As the tankers advance, they pass depots that seem to spring from the earth overnight, mountains of jerry cans, crates of ammunition, stacks of tires, tents filled with spare engines. Mechanics work in shifts under floodlights, swapping engines in the open fields, welding armor in the dark. To De Luca and his men, it feels like America itself is on the move, 1,000 factories crossing the ocean and setting up camp on French soil. Meanwhile, captured German camp near Le Mans. Oberfeldwebel Hans Keller sits under guard beside a wire fence, staring through the gaps at the Allied convoys roaring by. The sight mesmerizes him. Every few seconds, another column of Shermans passes, engines purring, crews relaxed, fuel drums strapped to their rears, aerial recognition flags fluttering in the wind. In between come trucks, fuel trucks, ammunition trucks, field kitchens, ambulances, so many that Keller loses count. His fellow prisoner, a young Wehrmacht mechanic named Dieter, watches too, wide-eyed. "They have more trucks than we had bullets," he whispers. Keller doesn't answer. He's remembering the endless breakdowns, the fuel shortages, the orders shouted through static-filled radios. In the Wehrmacht, he thinks bitterly, a tank that broke down became a pillbox. Here, in the Allied army, a broken tank seems only to pause, to rest, before roaring back to life again. August 28, 1944. At a makeshift maintenance yard near Chartres, a Sherman sits with its engine exposed. Mechanics crawl over it like surgeons at work. Each one knows their job without needing orders. One swaps the starter, another replaces the track. Fuel trucks hiss as they refill lines of armored vehicles. A young corporal named Eddie Foster wipes sweat from his face, grinning. "She'll be running by morning. Hell, this thing's easier to fix than my old Chevy." That was the secret. Standardization. Every Sherman, whether built in Detroit, Cleveland, or Chicago, used the same interchangeable parts. A damaged tank could be stripped for spares, a new engine bolted in within hours. The Germans, by contrast, fielded a patchwork of complex machines, Tigers, Panthers, Stugs, each demanding unique parts, specialized tools, and fuel they no longer had. In one report, a captured German officer admits, "We built masterpieces, they built thousands. We made machines of war, they made machines for war." September 2nd, 1944. The Red Ball Express in motion. Night has fallen, but the roads are alive. Convoys of GMC deuce-and-a-half trucks thunder eastward, headlights blacked out, drivers guided only by small cat-eye reflectors. More than 6,000 vehicles drive day and night between Normandy and the front lines, an unbroken lifeline of fuel, ammunition, and food. Private Leroy Jackson, one of the African-American drivers of the Red Ball Express, leans out of his cab as rain begins to fall. Mud splatters his windshield. The road ahead glows faintly with the red-painted hubcaps of the truck in front of him. "Ain't no rest on this road," his co-driver jokes, shouting over the engine noise. "I ain't supposed to be," Jackson replies. "Patton's boys gotta eat." They drive 16, 18, sometimes 20 hours straight, dodging wrecks, mines, and snipers. Every gallon of gasoline they deliver feeds the momentum of the armored columns. Each can of fuel poured into a Sherman's tank becomes another mile east, another town liberated. Back at the front, near Reims, DeLuca's crew has paused for refueling. The tank's hatches are open, and the men sit on the turret, drinking coffee from tin cups as the sun sets behind them. All around, other tanks line the fields, silhouettes against a sky streaked with contrails. The war has shifted. The hedgerows and ambushes of Normandy are gone. Now it's about movement, speed. DeLuca listens to the low drone of aircraft overhead, the steady rumble of engines in every direction. "You hear that?" he says quietly. "That's the sound of a war we're gonna win." Across the captured countryside, the contrast grows impossible to ignore. German prisoners trudge east under guard, exhausted, hollow-eyed, while beside them, Allied columns roll past, clean uniforms, well-fed crews, engines humming. In one field, Keller and the other POWs are forced to clear wreckage. As night falls, the hum of engines never stops. He lies awake under a thin blanket, staring at the glow of headlights on the horizon. Each one, he realizes, represents not a tank or truck, but a promise of supply, of renewal, of replacement, something his own country, now shattered, could no longer make. They fight with abundance. We fought with pride, and pride doesn't refill your tank. By mid-September, the Allied advance reaches the borders of Belgium and Luxembourg. The front has stretched to the breaking point, but still the Shermans roll, repaired, refueled, replaced, moving faster than anyone thought possible. For De Luca and his men, the war feels like a storm with no pause. Each morning brings new orders, new fuel, new roads. Each night brings the glow of headlights, the laughter of mechanics, the smell of hot coffee and machine oil. The German army, once a precision instrument of war, now moves in tatters, broken by something no doctrine had prepared them for: mass production and relentless rhythm. The laughter of German tankers that once filled the orchards of Normandy has been replaced by silence. And in that silence, only the steady thunder of the Sherman remains, echoing eastward towards the borders of the Reich. September 8th, 1944, near Mons, Belgium. Morning fog drifts low across the countryside. Dew clings to the grass, and the air smells of wet earth and burned fuel. Along a country road lined with poplars, hundreds of Sherman tanks and supply vehicles crawl east. Their tracks grind softly over the damp soil, the rhythmic churn blending into a single continuous sound, a sound that means progress. Inside his Sherman, Sergeant Frank De Luca watches the countryside blur past through his periscope. They've been advancing for weeks without pause, living off cold rations and canned coffee. He wipes condensation from the sight and grins faintly. "We started this war at the water's edge. Now we're halfway across Europe." The gunner, Red Malone, chuckles through the intercom. "Yeah, and this old girl hasn't let us down once. She takes a hit, we patch her up, she rolls again." He slaps the interior wall affectionately. "Hell, maybe they should give her a medal." The crew laughs, tired, genuine laughter. They know by now what the Germans never understood. The Sherman was never about perfection. It was about persistence. Far ahead, the 1st U.S. Army pushes toward Aachen, while the 3rd Army drives toward the Moselle. The German front bends and cracks under the pressure, yet somehow it does not completely break. The Wehrmacht, fighting on home soil now, is desperate and ferocious. In Aachen, the narrow streets funnel tanks into kill zones. German anti-tank guns and Panzerfausts lurk in every doorway. De Luca's tank rolls forward cautiously through the rubble. Machine guns chatter. Rifle fire echoes between stone walls. Smoke and plaster fill the air. Suddenly, a bright flash. A Panzerfaust slams into the building beside them. Bricks collapse onto the tank's hull. "Driver, reverse! Reverse!" De Luca shouts. The Sherman lurches backward, treads grinding over debris. A second blast scorches its side armor, denting the steel, but not breaching it. They return fire. A 75mm shell tears through the upper floor of the opposite house. The explosion silences the street. When the dust settles, De Luca exhales shakily. "Jesus, thought that was it." Malone just laughs weakly. "Ain't it funny, Sarge? They keep calling this thing a coffin, but she just won't die." Outside, infantry moves past them, waving them forward. The line inches deeper into the ruined city. Aachen, the first German city to fall, becomes a symbol, not of tank superiority, but of doctrine. Every Sherman moves with infantry, artillery, engineers, and air support in perfect coordination. Every push is rehearsed, coordinated, repeated, the embodiment of Allied combined arms warfare. It isn't glamorous, but it works. Meanwhile, across the border in a POW transport truck, Hans Keller rides in silence with other Panzermen. The truck bounces over rutted roads. Rain leaks through the canvas roof. The men sit wrapped in blankets, their faces gaunt and hollow-eyed. One of them, an older man with grease-stained hands, mutters bitterly, "If we had 10 more Tigers, we'd have stopped them at Caen." Keller shakes his head slowly. "And if they had lost 10 Shermans, they'd have sent 50 more. You can't win against that." The mechanic glares. "We talk like we never fought." "We fought," Keller says quietly. "We just never built a war that could last." No one replies. The truck rattles on through the rain. September 18th, near Eindhoven, Netherlands. British and American airborne forces drop behind enemy lines for Operation Martin Garden. Paratroopers scatter across fields and towns. Gliders smash into hedgerows. Ground columns, led by Shermans of the Guards Armored Division, push north to link up with them. But the Germans recover quickly. Panthers ambush from wooded roads. Bridges are blown. Rivers choke with wreckage. Once again, the difference is not skill, it's supply. Allied tankers find themselves running low on fuel, their supply lines stretched thin after the rapid advance from Normandy. For the first time since D-Day, the great machine hesitates. De Luca's tank grinds to a halt outside Nijmegen, the engine sputtering. "We're dry," his driver mutters. "Fuel trucks?" De Luca asks over the radio. 40 miles back," comes the reply. He climbs out onto the hull and stares down the empty road ahead. Smoke rises in the distance where British tanks fight for the bridge. The war, for the moment, has outrun its own heartbeat. For all its power, even this system can falter. At a forward headquarters near the Belgian border, logistics officers hunch over maps. Lines of colored string mark supply routes. Red pins mark fuel depots. They know they're close, perhaps too close. Every mile east demands thousands of gallons of gasoline, tons of spare parts, and rivers of ammunition. One officer mutters, "Our tanks can win any battle, but we've built an army that's addicted to movement." Another replies, "Better addicted to movement than to fantasy." They both know what he means. The German obsession with perfection, with building the ultimate tank, the ultimate gun, the ultimate soldier, has become their ruin. The Allies have built something simpler, humbler, and infinitely more deadly. A system that doesn't stop. Late that night, Keller sits in a POW camp near Liège, writing in a small notebook. A guard paces outside the wire. In the distance, the faint rumble of artillery rolls across the hills. He writes slowly, almost mechanically. "The Americans fight like engineers, not warriors. Each tank is part of something larger, a line, a process, a rhythm. Our Tigers were kings, but kings fall when the peasants have 10,000 spears." He closes the notebook and stares through the wire at the moon. For the first time, he feels not anger, but awe. October 1944, the Siegfried Line. The Shermans are battered and blackened, their paint scoured by months of campaign, yet still they move. Engineers clear mines, bulldozers fill craters, artillery pounds concrete bunkers ahead of the armor. De Luca's crew is tired beyond words, but the rhythm sustains them, the same rhythm that began on those Normandy beaches. "They said we were sending boys to fight tigers," Malone says as he loads another shell. "Guess the tigers ran out before the boys did," De Luca replies. They both grin faintly, knowing how much truth hides behind the joke. Each time the tank jerks forward, it feels like a heartbeat, the pulse of a machine that now spans continents. Behind them, new waves are already crossing the channel. Ahead lies the Rhine, and beyond that, the end of the war. The German crews had mocked the Sherman once. Now, even in defeat, they will remember its sound, not the roar of its engine, but the relentless thunder of everything that came with it. November 16th, 1944, near Eschweiler, Germany. The air is wet and freezing. Rain has turned every field into a bog. Tank tracks churn deep trenches through the muck, each movement a struggle. Clouds hang so low they seem to touch the ground. This is no longer the swift dash through France. This is grinding attrition, the push through the Siegfried Line, Germany's last defensive wall. Inside his Sherman, Sergeant Frank DeLuca rubs his hands together for warmth. His breath fogs inside the turret. "Feels like we're driving through glue," he mutters. His gunner, Red Malone, replies without looking up, "Better glue than mortars." They've been at it for months, advancing a few hundred yards at a time, clearing pillboxes one by one. The Shermans fire point-blank at concrete bunkers, while engineers race behind to blast doors and throw in grenades. Each victory costs lives, but the machine moves forward all the same. Every day fuel trucks find them. Every night mechanics appear out of the darkness to patch bullet holes, replace bogey wheels, refill ammo racks. The war has become a living cycle, mechanical, relentless, and unstoppable. November 22nd, Stolberg, Germany. The battle has turned the town into rubble. Smoke rises from shattered roofs. The church steeple lies broken in the street. DeLuca's tank edges forward, its hull scraping against fallen masonry. Infantry move alongside, ducking through doorways and cellars. From an upper floor, a German Panzer fires, the war's final equalizer. The rocket slams into the Sherman's left side, blasting armor plates outward. Inside, the crew is thrown hard. Alarms ring. Smoke fills the compartment. "Fire out! Fire out!" Malone yells through the smoke. DeLuca slams the hatch open. Freezing rain hits his face as he clambers onto the turret. The side armor is charred, but the tank is still running. He kicks at the flames until they die down. The crew stares at the smoking hole in the armor. It should have killed them, but luck, angle, and armor spacing saved them. "That's all you got?" Malone shouts into the ruins, half defiant, half insane. The infantry cheer. The tank lurches forward again, as if nothing happened. Meanwhile, across the Rhine, the German army is dying on its feet. In a half-frozen field near Düren, Oberfeldwebel Hans Keller, now a POW laborer, watches Allied armor roll eastward. He's part of a work detail clearing debris from roads so the same tanks that destroyed his world can pass. He moves slowly, shoulders hunched against the cold. Each Sherman that rumbles by feels like a ghost, familiar, unstoppable. One of the guards, a young American, barely 20, offers him a cigarette. Keller hesitates, then takes it. They stand in silence as a column of tanks passes. The sound is like distant thunder rolling endlessly across the plains. "You guys build a lot of those," Keller says finally. The guard smirks. "Hell, we don't even build them all. Detroit does most of the work. We just drive them where they're needed." Keller exhales smoke into the gray air. "That's the difference," he says quietly. "We built tanks to fight. You built tanks to win." The guard doesn't answer. He just nods, maybe not understanding, maybe understanding perfectly. November 22nd, 1944, the Ardennes. Winter descends hard. Snow muffles everything. The Germans strike one last time, the Battle of the Bulge. In the forests near Bastogne, American columns are ambushed. Fog blinds aircraft. Fuel freezes in lines, and the Shermans, those ever-present beasts of war, suddenly find themselves surrounded. For the first time in months, the tide briefly turns. Panzer IVs and King Tigers smash through thin American lines. Towns change hands by the hour. The Germans call it Wacht am Rhein, their final gamble. De Luca's division is ordered north to reinforce Bastogne. The roads are jammed with trucks, jeeps, ambulances, all fighting the cold and exhaustion. When they finally arrive, the scene is chaos. Burning half-tracks, snow stained black by smoke, and trees splintered by shell fire. De Luca's Sherman fires blindly into the woods, muzzle flashes lighting up the night. The crew barely eats or sleeps. For days, they fight through snowstorms and fog. Every time a Sherman is hit, another takes its place. Every time a Panther is destroyed, it stays destroyed. When the skies clear, P-47 Thunderbolts return. The forest erupts under rockets and bombs. The German offensive, already starving for fuel, collapses. By January, the bulge recedes. The snow melts red. March 7, 1945, Remagen, Germany. At 1 p.m., word spreads like wildfire. American troops have captured the Ludendorff Bridge intact. For the first time, the Allies are across the Rhine. De Luca's battalion rolls up hours later. The bridge trembles under the weight of armor, its steel ribs bent and blackened by failed demolition charges. Engineers shout warnings as tanks rumble across. "We're in Germany now," Malone whispers. "We've been heading here since Omaha," De Luca replies. On the far bank, the road to the heart of the Reich opens wide. Behind them, the Rhine glitters in the afternoon sun. The river Hitler had once called Germany's impenetrable shield. Now it carries the reflection of hundreds of olive-drab tanks crossing in formation. Each one bears scars from Normandy, Saint-Lô, Falaise, Aachen, the long road of fire that began on those beaches months ago. Each one is a reminder of the laughter that once echoed through orchards and camps, the laughter of men who thought the war could be won by engineering alone. In the weeks that follow, Germany collapses. Cities surrender faster than the tanks can reach them. Roads fill with refugees, columns of POWs, and the shattered remains of once proud divisions. Keller, still a prisoner, watches from the roadside as the Shermans roll east toward the Elbe. Some are covered in mud, some scarred, others newly arrived from the ports of Antwerp. It doesn't matter. They all move the same way, steadily, endlessly, confidently. He thinks of the first one he saw on the beaches of Normandy, the strange floating contraptions they'd laughed at. He remembers the roar of their engines, the chaos of the invasion, and how quickly that laughter turned to disbelief. Now, as the war nears the end, that disbelief has become respect, grudging, bitter, but real. "They built more than tanks," Keller murmurs to himself. "They built momentum." April 1945, Central Germany. Spring arrives. The thunder fades. On a ridge overlooking the ruins of a German town, De Luca's Sherman sits idling. Birds return to the trees. The air smells of rain and ashes. The gun barrel, blackened and scarred, points east, towards Berlin, already encircled by the Soviets. The crew sits quietly on the hull, sharing a single cigarette. No cheers, no flags, no music, just exhaustion. "Think it's over?" Malone asks. "For us," De Luca says. "For them, it's just beginning." He means rebuilding, the reckoning that will come after the fire. The Sherman's engine rumbles one last time before shutting down. The sound lingers, faint and ghostly across the valley, the sound that had followed Europe for nearly a year. It is the sound of industry turned into endurance, of laughter turned into silence, of machines that refuse to stop. May 8, 1945, VE Day. Church bells ring across Europe. Columns of Sherman stand silent on cobblestone streets, their crews smiling faintly beneath helmets streaked with grime. Somewhere behind barbed wire, Keller hears the news too. He looks toward the west, toward the sound of celebration carried on the wind, and nods once. The war that began in arrogance ends in awe. The men who mocked the Sherman will never forget what came after. The endless, roaring tide that crossed the beaches, rolled through the hedgerows, shattered their armies, and crossed the Rhine. The laughter died in Normandy. The echo of the treads never did.